The proximity alarm screamed through my cockpit before I even had time to blink the sleep out of my eyes. I was 3 days into a routine salvage run near the Kessler debris belt, half asleep at the controls of my old hauler, when the console lit up red and a distress signal cut through my speakers like a knife. It was weak, fading. The kind of signal that tells you someone out there does not have much time left. I almost ignored it. Out here, past the edge of patrolled space, distress calls are sometimes traps. Pirates use them to lure in soft targets. I had heard stories of haulers like mine getting gutted for their cargo after answering a call just like this one. But something about the tone of the signal made my hands move before my brain caught up. I pulled up the coordinates. A small pod, tumbling slowly through a field of broken metal and ice. Its hull scorched black on one side like it had barely survived something much bigger trying to kill it. I brought my ship in close, heart pounding, scanners sweeping the wreckage for any sign of hostile ships. Nothing. Just silence and drifting debris and that one pod, spinning end over end, its emergency beacon blinking weaker with every rotation. I do not consider myself a hero. I am a pilot. I move cargo, I fix engines, I get paid, I move on. But I have never been able to leave someone to die when I had the power to stop it. That is just something wired into me, something I never had to think twice about. I suited up, grabbed my emergency kit, and crossed the gap between our ships using the tether line, my boots scraping against twisted metal that used to be part of a much larger vessel. Whatever had happened here, it had been violent. Whoever was inside that pod had been running from something, and losing. The hatch was jammed, half melted from heat damage. I had to pry it open with a crowbar, sparks flying off the metal, my breath fogging up the inside of my helmet from the effort. When it finally gave way, what I found inside made me freeze for a second. She was not human. That much was obvious right away. Her skin had a faint silver sheen under the emergency lights, and her eyes, half open, were a deep violet color I had never seen before. She wore what looked like formal robes, torn and burned along one side, and there was blood, dark blue, pooling beneath her. She was alive. Barely. I did not have time to marvel at the fact that I was looking at an alien woman, possibly the first one I had ever seen up close in my entire life. I just moved. I got my arms under her, careful of what looked like a broken shoulder, and pulled her free of the wreckage. She stirred as I lifted her, her violet eyes fluttering open, fixing on my face through my helmet visor. I do not know what she saw. Maybe just a blurry shape, a stranger in a suit, in a language she probably did not speak yet. But I remember she did not fight me. She just went still, like she had decided, in that moment, that I was not going to hurt her. Getting her back across the tether line was the hardest thing I have done in years. She weighed less than I expected, but every movement seemed to cause her pain, and I had to be careful not to jostle her too much while also moving fast enough that we did not run out of oxygen in her damaged suit. I got her into my ship, sealed the airlock, and pulled off both our helmets. The air was thin and cold, tasting of scorched metal, but she was breathing. That was all that mattered in that moment. I laid her down in the small medical bay at the back of my ship, a space I mostly used for storage, and started doing what I could. I am not a doctor. I know basic field medicine, enough to keep a human alive after an accident. I had no idea what her biology needed, what medicine would help her or kill her, what her normal body temperature should even be. So I did what any person would do. I improvised. I cleaned the wound on her side with what I hoped was a safe antiseptic, wrapped her shoulder to keep it stable, and set her body temperature regulator to what felt like a safe range based on her skin warmth. Then I sat beside her and waited, because there was nothing else I could do. She woke up hours later, gasping, her violet eyes wide with fear, scanning the unfamiliar room, the unfamiliar face beside her. She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it, wincing, one hand going to her side. I raised both my hands slowly, the universal sign for I am not going to hurt you, and spoke softly, even though I knew she probably could not understand a word. You are safe, I said. You are on my ship. I found you in that wreck. I am not going to hurt you. She stared at me for a long moment, her breathing slowly steadying. Then, to my surprise, she spoke, her words strange and clipped, but understandable through what I assumed was some kind of translation implant. You saved me, she said, her voice weak but clear. Why? It was such a strange question to me. Why would I not? Because you were dying, I told her, and I could stop that. That is really all there is to it. She studied my face like she was trying to find the trick in my answer, the hidden motive, the price I was going to demand later. I did not understand yet why she looked at me that way. I would understand later. Her name, she eventually told me, was Sarah. She did not tell me much else at first. She said her ship had been attacked, that she had barely made it to the escape pod before the rest of her vessel was destroyed. She did not say who attacked her, or why, and I did not push. I figured she would tell me when she was ready, if she was ready at all. Over the next few days, as her wounds slowly healed under the limited medical care I could give her, something shifted between us. She started asking questions about my ship, about Earth, about humans in general. I could tell she had heard things about us before, and none of it sounded particularly flattering. "Your people are considered simple," she told me one evening, sitting across from me in the small galley, a cup of warm broth between her hands. Young, reckless, not worth much attention from the larger powers of the galaxy. I laughed at that, actually laughed, which seemed to surprise her. "Yeah," I said. "I have heard that one before. Doesn't bother me much. We know who we are." "And who are you?" she asked, tilting her head slightly, studying me the way you might study a puzzle you were not sure how to solve. I thought about that question for a second. "People who do not leave others to die," I said, "even if it costs us something, even if we get nothing back for it." She went quiet after that, and I noticed her looking at me differently, like she was recalculating something in her head. Over the following days, I taught her small things about being human. She was fascinated by coffee, wrinkling her nose the first time she tasted it, then asking for more the next morning. She found human humor strange, especially our habit of joking in dangerous situations, but she slowly started to understand it, even smiling at some of my worst jokes. I never asked her directly who she really was. Something told me it was not my business, that she would tell me when the time was right, or maybe never at all. I was not doing this to get answers out of her. I was doing this because she needed help, and I happened to be there. It took us 6 days to reach the nearest neutral station, a trading post called Ondril that sat at the crossing point of several trade routes. I had planned to drop her there, let the local authorities figure out where she belonged, and go back to my life of moving cargo and fixing engines. That plan fell apart the moment we docked. The station alarms went off almost as soon as my ship registered on their system. Within minutes, 3 massive warships appeared out of nowhere, sleek black vessels unlike anything I had ever seen, their hulls marked with symbols I did not recognize. They surrounded the station, weapons systems clearly active, and my communication panel lit up with an incoming transmission demanding immediate compliance. I looked over at Sarah, who had gone very still, her face pale. "They found me," she whispered. Before I could ask who they were, my ship was boarded by armored figures, tall and silent, moving with the kind of precision that told me they were not amateurs. They did not threaten me, exactly, but they did not exactly treat me like a friend either. I was escorted off my own ship and brought into a holding room on the station, my mind racing through every possible explanation for what was happening. It took almost an hour before anyone explained anything to me. A tall figure entered the room, dressed in dark formal robes, his presence immediately commanding, the kind of authority you feel in your bones before anyone says a word. His skin held the same faint silver sheen as Sarah's, his eyes a deeper, more intense violet. "You are the human who found my daughter," he said, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable weight. I sat there for a second, processing that sentence. Daughter. His daughter. I did not know she was anyone important, I said honestly. I found a wrecked pod. I found someone dying inside it. I helped her, because that is what you do when someone is dying and you can stop it. He studied me the way Sarah had studied me on that first night, searching for hidden motives, calculating angles I supposedly had. "My daughter is Sarah, heir to the throne of the Velmuran Dominion," he said. "One of the largest and oldest empires in known space. Do you understand what that means?" I honestly did not. Not fully. Not in that moment. I just shook my head. "It means," he continued, "that by our ancient laws, whoever saves the life of a member of the royal bloodline, without seeking gain, without seeking advantage, earns what we call a life debt. A debt that cannot be dismissed, cannot be ignored, and must be repaid according to the severity of the act." I opened my mouth to say I did not want anything, that I had not done it for a reward, but he raised a hand, silencing me before I could speak. "I know," he said, something shifting in his expression, something almost like respect. "My daughter already told me. She told me you asked for nothing, that you fed her, sheltered her, protected her, and never once tried to use her identity, once you suspected it, for your own benefit." I still did not know what to say, so I said the only thing that felt true. "She needed help," I said simply. "That is all it ever was." He looked at me for a long moment, something unreadable passing behind his violet eyes. "Among my people," he finally said, "such selflessness is rare, even within our own ranks. Among a species my advisors have long dismissed as primitive and unworthy of serious consideration, it is unheard of. I felt a flicker of something between pride and defensiveness on behalf of my entire species, but I stayed quiet, letting him continue. The life debt must be repaid, he said, and I intend to repay it in a manner fitting to the act. I expected wealth. Some quiet part of me, the practical salvage pilot part, expected credits, maybe enough to retire on, maybe enough to buy a better ship. What he said instead changed everything, not just for me, but for every human being alive. By the ancient law of my people, he announced, his voice carrying, clearly meant to be heard by more than just me, the species known as humanity shall be recognized as a protected and sovereign people under the full weight of the Velmiran dominion. Your species shall be granted a seat within the Galactic Council, with full voice and full standing, an honor never before extended to a species so young. I stood there in complete silence, unable to process the scale of what he had just said. This was not a personal reward. This was a shift in the entire balance of power across known space. Humanity, dismissed for decades as insignificant, unworthy of attention from the larger galactic powers, was suddenly being handed a seat at the table of the most powerful species in existence. Word of this decision spread through the galaxy faster than I could have imagined. Within days, other species were reaching out to Earth's governments, suddenly eager to establish trade agreements, diplomatic ties, alliances that had never even been considered possible before. Humanity's standing among the stars transformed almost overnight, all because of one small act that I had never expected to matter to anyone beyond the person I had pulled out of that wreckage. Sarah found me later that day, sitting alone in the docking bay beside my ship, still trying to process everything that had happened. You did not have to say yes to any of it, she said, sitting down beside me. My father would have honored the debt regardless of what you wanted. I know, I said, but it was not really about me. This changes things for everyone. For my whole species, how could I say no to that? She smiled, something warm and genuine in her expression that I had not seen from her before, not even during our days together on my ship. You really are strange, she said. Even now you are thinking of others before yourself. I shrugged. That is just how I was raised, I guess, how most of us were raised. She looked out at the stars visible through the docking bay window, her expression thoughtful. My father does not extend respect easily, she said, especially not to species he considers beneath him. What you did changed something in him, changed how he sees your people. I did not really do anything special, I told her. I just helped someone who needed it. That is exactly why it mattered, she said, turning to look at me directly. You expected nothing. You did not know who I was. You did not calculate the benefit to yourself before deciding to save me. Among my people, that kind of selflessness is almost impossible to find, even among our closest allies. We sat there together for a while, watching the ships come and go from the station, humanity's fate quietly rewritten somewhere in the negotiations happening behind us. Negotiations I had accidentally set into motion with nothing more than a decision to answer a distress call I could have easily ignored. Before she left with her father's fleet, Sarah turned back to me one last time. This is not goodbye, she said. My people do not forget a life debt, and I do not forget the person who saved me when he had every reason to leave me behind. I watched her ship depart, disappearing into the black alongside the rest of the Velmiran fleet, and I sat there for a long time afterward, trying to understand how a single ordinary decision, made without any thought of reward, had ended up changing the fate of my entire species. I went back to salvage work eventually, back to fixing engines and hauling cargo across the same quiet corners of space I had always worked. But everything around me had changed. Human ships were welcomed at stations that used to turn us away. Other species began seeking us out, curious about the species that had earned the respect of the Velmiran dominion through nothing more than basic human decency. I still think about that distress signal sometimes, about how close I came to ignoring it, about how different things would have turned out if I had just kept flying that day. But I did not ignore it. I could not. Because somewhere deep down, every human carries that same instinct, the refusal to leave someone behind when we have the power to help. It turns out that instinct, the simple decision to help someone without expecting anything in return, was worth more to the galaxy than any weapon, any technology, any amount of wealth we could have offered. It turns out that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness carry a weight far greater than anyone could have predicted, rippling outward until they reshape the fate of entire worlds. And it all started with one dying signal, one wrecked pod, and one decision I never once regretted making.